So pleased to have Benton Dillinger at the table from Theater Projects Consultants. So thank you very much for coming down. You're based in Norwalk. So we're going to talk all things theater.
Great.
Give me a little bit of your background, how you become a senior project manager and working with the likes of Frank Gehry, the famed architect. So how does one end up in this field?
Well, I actually started when I was 12. My dad is a theater composer on the West Coast, and so I would hang out at the theater. And so I started when I was 12 working in the theater and slowly doing all the different jobs that you do, from sweeping floors to painting to welding scenery. So over time, I just learned all the different components of how to do a theater.
So you weren't sick of it? You really wanted to go into this?
No. Well, I had a choice. I could do music or I could do theater. I went to theater one summer too long, and I ended up a theater person.
Tell me about some of the things that Theater Projects does. And you guys are global. You're based in Norwalk, but you're global. So give me some of the highlights of things you've done.
Well, first of all, we are theater designers and planners, which is a little bit different than some consultants. They just specify equipment to go inside theaters. We think of a more holistic approach towards a building, and we think about the entire experience going into a building, from the time you get on your jacket to come to the theater to the time you leave. We would like to say that every experience you have in a theater has been touched by Theater Projects. So how many restrooms are in the facility?
And that's important.
Which is very good. We have a special calculation for how many toilets to have in a theater. So those kinds of things, and our history of doing projects around the world, like the Disney Concert Hall, the Kodak Theater, which is now the Dolby Theater in Hollywood, was one of our projects. When you start to look at some of these things, you'll see a signature of a type of theater that has an envelopment of the audience surrounding the performer, and that engagement between an audience member and a performer, and a performer with that audience member. Those are the key signatures of Theater Projects, and it's what our founder, Richard Pilbrow, started the company about. It's theater people creating spaces not only for theater, but to be participating with audience members in theater. So that's very important to what we do.
Now, the Schubert Theater in New Haven, Connecticut is going to celebrate 100 years in December. Lots of things have changed in theaters since the Schubert was built. What are some of the things that are evolving in theaters that you guys are building? Things
that are evolving now in theater is more of this, I kind of think of it as like the social media of the arts, right? This connection, this immediate connection between a performer and its audience member, right? So we're putting more video into these spaces. We're putting more connectivity that allows performances to get out into the world at a larger scale and a faster way. So you don't necessarily think of just a theater as a simple little place where you do a theater piece or a dance piece. You think of that as a vessel by which you take your art and you expand it out. So it's still highly important that you have this one-on-one engagement with an audience member, but it's become even more important that that one-on-one engagement gets out to a broader public that might be looking at something on a phone, might be looking at it on a computer.
So you have to think on all platforms as well now.
Yeah, you have to start envisioning theater as something much more malleable in this world of technology, something that is not driven by technology, but is starting to get very savvy in how to use technology to benefit and give them more visibility.
We're going to have examples of that. Let's first look at Virginia Tech's The Cube. It's the Moss Art Center.
Yes.
And you all put this together. Here's the first picture that you're talking about.
Yep.
Lots going on in one theater.
The idea between the Moss and the old center is that it's not just a simple performance venue, right? It's visual arts and performance. So what you'll see in the Cube and in a lot of these things is how the visual artists are being brought into the performing arts and saying, let's engage not just as a single performance entity. What happens when you put a musician with a painter, with a video artist into one space? What can they create? And so when you start to look at some of these things, you'll start to see the artist working with a performance artist.
In the next photo, we have more of multi-platforms going
on. That's right.
Now, this, do you look up into
that?
Yes,
you can look up into that. The Cube is actually really a high-tech art gallery. So it's a square thing with galleries that wrap around it, and then over the top it has this grid, we call it a gridiron. It's a walking surface that then you can drop chain motors,
Wow.
rigging points down, and you can hang, like in this case, all these kind of projection screens get hung. Projectors are mounted onto these galleries that wrap around the room. So you actually walk into it. It's almost equivalent of like a studio with a very tall ceiling that you can walk into and experience it as a visual art gallery, but as a visual art gallery for the 21st century.
What
which
an
is
experience.
About, oh yeah,
Sitting in a seat there.
Pictures you see, well, you don't even have to sit in a seat anymore. Because
Oh,
now
you're
it's
moving
not
around it
about
as
you
well?
saying, you sit there and I will perform for you.
Interesting.
We say, you come into the space, you participate in that space one-on-one with the object. So it's like going to an art gallery where you might see a statue, but now it is an interactive kind of thing. So now you can start to walk into the room and you can touch it. Maybe your movement can actually set off something that's going to make the next part of that piece of art work. These are the new things in colleges, universities, they're all talking about it right now. The whole idea of STEAM, right? Science and technology in the arts, right? Getting together and creating spaces that allow creative people to produce something that is different than has been created before.
And we have one more shot of the Moss Arts Center, which this is amazing stuff.
And see, when you look in there, if you look up into the middle of that thing, you'll see that gridiron I'm talking about, where you can walk above there, and that's how you can hang stuff and you can get involved in it that way.
So the sky is the limit. If you can imagine it, you can do it.
The idea is that if you can imagine it within reason and budget, right, you can actually start to do this. But the room is an armature. It's the reason that you can put things around and make it happen. And that happens to be a very rough and tumbled kind of black boxy kind of thing. But other projects that we do take the same idea, but maybe refine it more and make it more pretty. Maybe it's a concert hall kind of thing that has still all this stuff going on in it to create interactive things, but not so rough and tumble.
We're going to show the folks a video in a second here about the New World Center in Miami Beach. Explain what this is. It's an amazing space.
The New World Center is the home for the New World Symphony and Academy that was founded by Michael Tilson Thomas, who is the conductor for the San Francisco Symphony. And Michael has a vision, and it's a vision of training top flight artists to be the next generation of not just musicians, but administrators, the vanguard of what it means to be a musician in the 21st century. So what he wanted, he wanted a laboratory, a place that they could experiment with what is the next generation of music making, and how are we going to get audiences to come to music and hear music being played with this whole advent of technology and phones and things where you can stream on Spotify your favorite, San Francisco Symphony. So this room is a transformative room. The walls, it was designed by Frank Gehry, and the room itself is, I kind of consider it like a mood ring. So it's all projections inside. So all the walls and the sails inside can be lit up with projections. So you can design visual art to go with the music. So their opening was pictures at an exhibition. They did a competition with the film school at USC, and they selected animators from the film school to create an animated film for each section of pictures at an exhibition. So then they played the piece, and they had these animations and these films going on during the piece.
Wow.
So now, again, they're saying we're not just about you sit down and listen to Bach and you know you love it because it's good for you. They're saying let's sit down and let's create a moment that will allow you to explore the music in a way you hadn't thought about before. Allow us to show you that it's not stuffy, it's not elitist, it's really an engaging kind of activity that you as an audience member might want to be involved in. And they experiment with it all the time. They do not only symphony concerts, they do a pulse concert where at night, at 11 o'clock at night, they have a concert where they bring in a DJ. And they flat the whole room. Yeah, exactly. The whole lower orchestra level opens up, and you'll see in the video how it expands itself, so it has a big flat floor. They set a DJ up on a big thing. They have their orchestra playing there, and they go back and forth playing DJ music that's high and pulsing, and then the symphony will play a pulsing piece of symphonic work, and they'll go back and forth, and they'll have drinks, and they'll have dancing, and they'll do all this sort of stuff. But at the end of it, they can all go into another room and listen to the same music.
I can't wait to go there. All right, let's roll this and let's look at the New World Center. Tell me about this.
That's right. So what you're seeing now is the orchestra riser system, which is all on lifts that allows it to raise up for when there's the orchestra, but then it can also sink down to create a flat floor. So you can do different types of things, small ensemble work, maybe a jazz concert, or even open up the whole thing by having the telescopic seating slide away like you're sitting there, and it becomes a flat floor. You can do a banquet. You can do a pulse concert, a rave going on in there if you want to.
A rave, I love how you said that, right?
Exactly.
What did this cost to build?
The overall thing was about $200 million, but what they have a whole bunch of money put into the endowment to actually operate and run this thing, which is very key. Again, it's an educational, it's a laboratory, but it only works if you can actually have all the toys that are shown in here.
And automatically all this stuff goes up and sinks and moves around?
Yes, it's all motorized. There's some manual stuff in terms of the seats that have to be removed in certain areas like that, but mostly it's done to be somewhat push button to be able to make it affordable and easy for the crew to do this, because it's a shoestring in some ways in terms of the kind of people that are operating it, but it's really, really important that they had the flexibility to create this laboratory.
It's amazing what you can do. You can make it very grand or very small in this massive space.
Right.
Let's now talk about the D. and Charles Wyly Theater in Dallas, Texas. Let's set this up. Tell me about this theater.
So the Wyly Theater is the home for the Dallas Theater Center. We actually started working on the Art Center in Dallas about 28 years ago now.
Really?
It started a long time ago where we talked about building this and advising them. This is when we talk about from beginning to end. We were the first consultant probably on that project, and we were the last to walk out when it was all done. So we built an opera house. We also built this what we would call a regional theater, but it's a little bit different because the building that the Dallas Theater Center was in was near on the site. It was basically a butler building, a metal building that was there so that they could do whatever they wanted. They could transform it, they could, dig a hole in the floor if they wanted to and build scenery there, and the audience relationship could change all the time. So when we finally started working on this version, this was a modern version that Joshua Ramus and Rem Koolhaus came up with, that was taking their idea of a flexible theater and kind of turning it on its end, because normally theaters are kind of horizontal. Mm-hmm. You have your stage, you have your back of house space, you have your front of house space, you have your rehearsal halls nearby. But what they wanted to do was create an object in the landscape that had both stature and visibility to the rest of the arts district, but they also wanted it to have that cool warehouse kind of feel to it. So the idea was, rather than having it all horizontal, they stacked it all up vertical.
All right, let's take a look at that and we can talk over how you guys designed this.
The important thing is that the Wyly is a highly flexible space. So when you're looking right now in the theater, the idea is that the seating can be transformed, can be taken out, so you can have a completely open space, or you can bring in these big, huge seating towers that slide down and get into position. The stage in the front there has all these different lifts that rotate and re-rate so that you can create different kinds of relationships. An end stage, which is like a proscenium, or you can do a thrust theater that allows the audience to go right into the middle of the action. The idea also was that you could do this fairly quickly and efficiently. The Arts District warehouse they had, it took a week or two sometimes to turn it around. Mm-hmm. This thing takes about a day to do the largest changeover to the thrust or to the end stage.
When somebody comes to you and says, we want to build this, design this theater that does all this kind of stuff, where do you even start to build this?
Well, we start by doing it in terms of the program. The thing that's important to notice about things like this and the things about New World, they're very elaborate, they're very complicated. And people say, well, you're going to do this again. And I say, we'll only do it again if the users, the client, the people that are going to do the art in the building are going to use it. So the important thing when you see all these crazy things is it necessary for the art that they're going to do? So we plan and we sit there and say, what are you going to do? What kind of theater are you going to do? How are you going to go about doing this? And from that, we start to develop what we call a program, which is a list of rooms that are going to be in there. And then we start talking about, well, what kind of room do you want? And for the Wyly, actually, We designed the room. It was a kind of a courtyard theater, 600-seat room with a fly tower, fairly standard. It was kind of flexible. It was the Cool House and Josh Ramus who said, hey, what if we just had an open space? What if we just had a big flat floor? How does that work? And we said, well, that's not necessarily something that they've talked about wanting, but let's go back and ask them if that's beneficial to them. It was beneficial for the center because then they could turn that into a party room. They could turn it into
which means a rental and
money coming in. And what was amazing about that, when you have a true collaboration, like we have a really good collaboration with Frank Gehry's office, we have a good collaboration with Cool House and with Joshua Ramus. What they do is they bring to the table an idea that you didn't think about. So in New World, the idea was, well, what if the walls were projection screens? We were hanging stuff in the air and doing all that sort of stuff. And Frank said, well, what if the walls were a projection screen? It takes it to another level. And you go, wow, I never thought about that. It makes it better. Josh coming in and saying, hey, instead of just doing the standard, what everyone expects a theater to be, what if it was a glass box that the objects were put into it? It's going to look exactly like you sketched it, 3 years before Cool House was ever on the project. But we're going to take that and we're going to make it something really special. And it was hard. We worked, John Coyne, my partner on that, John and I worked minute by minute, hour by hour, to think of every little bit and part that moves.
Like, how is that going to be possible?
How's it going to work? How are you going to put it together? How do you make sure a dressing room is nearby so that if a person is in a wheelchair, they can get onto that stage? There's dressing rooms on stage. How do you get something that an administration that's normally right over here, where do you put them? So we put them right above. And when you look at that theater, if you ever do, and you're inside it, there's all this visual stuff. So from the rehearsal hall, you can look down into a meeting room. From a meeting room, you can look down into the costume shop. You can go all the way through this. So you're connected into a building like a high-rise, better than you'd ever be in a normal high-rise. Because we're an arts institution, we are dependent upon collaboration.
Sure.
So all of that stuff is carefully designed and put into it, but it's definitely for them.
Let's talk about the state of Connecticut. You're global and you're doing things in Brazil, India, and Greece. You talked to me a little bit about something that WestCon has a brand new theater. Eastern, you guys are working on
we're working on a thing with Slam Collaborative and William Rahn Architects out of Boston. Bill Rahn did the Seiji Ozawa Hall at Tanglewood, and he's also working on a project at Eastern Connecticut. and they're kind of nice. There are multiple spaces, so there's theater and there's rehearsal, and it's fairly tight and fairly compact. But the idea is that they'll have a nice art center that'll support their school. And this is what's interesting about Connecticut right now, is that they really are starting to focus on the arts with Western Connecticut and their wonderful new building.
$90 million.
$90 million. Holtzman Moss Bettino are really good theater architects based in New York. I've done several projects with them. They did a really nice thing there, and it's a commitment to the arts. And as we were talking about earlier, the thing that's important about the arts, I think, today, more than anything, is that they need to support a healthy civilization. It's not about we're going to create artists that are going to go out and perform or something like that. What we want to do is we want to create engineers that have a really strong background in the arts, so that they'll support the arts. So they will go to symphony, they will go to theater, they will have new experiences that they'll bring to it. So I think it's great that Eastern Connecticut's doing it, Western Connecticut's doing it.
And UConn's doing something too.
UConn is doing a production facility that we've been working on off and on for a long time. It's all kind of this recommitment to the arts, because I think sometimes it falls off the radar. It's important to build a business school, it's important to build your science, but liberal arts is about science, it's about the arts as well. It's about literature, it's about music, it's about theater, because that's how you tell story, that's how you communicate who we are as a civilization. And if you don't do that, if you don't teach people how to do that, you are in danger of losing sight of what it means to be a human being in the 21st century.
Well said. Benton Dillinger, thank you so much for being on and enlightening us about what's going on around the world with you guys and in the state of Connecticut. I appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Imagine listen, who's this girl I spend all night kissing? And if was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store of my mind.